The Raptors are free falling. Let's get into it next on Beyond the Locker Room. The Raptors had their playing game last night against the New York Knicks on home soil, and it didn't go too well, as most of you know now. If you haven't checked the score, you weren't watching the game. Obviously, the Raptors lost pretty handily by the Knicks. They were able and competitive for one quarter, and then second quarter came, and it went to you know where. Brunson went off for about 20, over 20 points in the first quarter. They had no answer for him, and then the rest of the guys got into the act, as the game moved forward. So what's going on with the Raptors with this free fall? They've lost about 5 out of the last 6, I believe now, in all sorts of ways from all sorts of different levels of competition. We're talking from the the lowly Charlottes, if you want to say, to up to the higher tiers, in this case like the Knicks. So right now we're seeing a real situation going on with the Raptors where it could get ugly really quickly, and if they don't get things sorted out. So how did we get here? A few weeks ago, I did a podcast talking about the streak. At the time, I told Raptor fans, just hold on a little bit before you start getting the ticker tape parade going on University Avenue. And the reason I was saying so then, I mentioned the 4 pillars I was talking about that has been an issue in my mind as far as weaknesses for the Raptors, that are going to continue to be weaknesses of Raptors unless they really deal with them at some point, which was defense, half-court offense or efficiency on offense, depth of the front court, and of course point guard play. And for the most part in this losing streak, you've seen elements of those pillars come to fruition as far as like poor defense. They just got 67 points, I believe, put on them at the half against the Knicks, 77 against the Boston on Sunday. Half-court offense late game stretches, as you saw with Charlotte, where, and other close games they've had recently, where they just can't seem to get a bucket late or a bucket in the fourth quarter. And it's pretty much like, give the ball to Will offense, whereas they give the ball to Brandon, and he's trying to make something happen, with like 2 guys hanging off of him. Not likely going to be winning basketball. The point guard play, Quickly's going back to some of the stuff he had at the beginning of the season where he's trying to do too much with the ball. He's not a decision maker. I don't know how many times we have to say it. He's not a decision maker. And then also too, some of the rotations that you see here from Darko, we'll get into that as well too, has been extremely questionable. So, with the Raptors defense, I mentioned at the beginning of the season, I didn't see how a team that had so many below average defenders in the starting lineup could actually pull this off and be like a top 10 defense to be actually considered a threat in the playoffs. And unfortunately, that's now kind of come to fruition. Ironically, with RJ on the bench. Now, I know a lot of Raptor fans feel like once RJ's back, everything will be fine. And to some extent, he will help with the offense in this case here, but he won't help in the defensive end. That's the problem. That's one of the major problems. Offense-wise, he should help for the half-court offense, for the efficiency a little bit, to take pressure off of Ingram and Scottie. But I don't know how much it will help overall because he, too, can't create his own shot consistently. And even though he can get to the line much more than, say, Scottie Barnes, he's never been a great free throw shooter late in games. So that's also problematic. I don't know. I am curious to see, I'll say this much for RJ. I mean, this has been the most fruitful 3 weeks of his career possibly because he's making him a lot of money right now, him sitting on the bench and his team's losing. I think I saw a stat today. I think he's got over 700 winning percentage with RJ this season and 333 with RJ out. So he's going to be out at least for, it looks like it might be at least the end of the calendar year. So this is a very dangerous time, Raptor fans. At the moment, I've heard comments, I've been on some different forums and spaces, folks talking about, oh, the schedule, oh, it's so tough to schedule. I'm going to point out something, folks. And his observation I had with Hopeful and Kenyon a few days ago, and we checked the schedule. And because I was going by memory, I don't think the Raptors have played a team past the Mason-Dixon line yet this season. The closest in this case is, I'm not sure if you're a geography major, but the closest would be for a team heading west has been Cleveland. That's it. I don't think they even played a game outside the Eastern time zone as far as like start times. Saturday at 7:30 start. Heck, they've had some 6:30 starts because of the Blue Jays. They haven't had games yet where they're playing at 9 o'clock or after 9 o'clock, or definitely West Coast games. So that is coming, guys. So you thought the schedule was rough before, which, quite honestly, you caught some breaks with certain teams that weren't up to snuff and 100%. That's not going to be the case moving forward. Teams are getting healthier. Teams are improving, as they do every time after the quarter mark. And you're not going on the road now. And I mean the road, Midwest, Mountain, Pacific. Like, you're going to be starting to head out those parts. And how this team looks right now and their demeanor, the thing with them too is they don't really, this gets to my next point. They don't really have a guy who can just grab them by the scruff of the neck and say, hey, tonight's the night, we're just not losing. And that guy, you would hope to be Scottie Barnes. But Scottie Barnes right now doesn't quite honestly have the game to be able to do that. And I don't think he has the demeanor to do so. And the reason why I say so is that the game that Scottie Barnes should have put his imprint and say we're stopping the bleeding right there was the Charlotte game. There's no way you come out of the game with Charlotte and have that type of performance. And I said at the time, I said it on Twitter, you go check my tweets. I said I could bet my house in this case when the week started last week that he would play balls out against the Lakers and nowhere to be found the next night against Charlotte. Sadly, that is a microcosm of the mentality of Scottie Barnes throughout his whole career. He'll get up for certain games, certain matchups. He's all in. Chips all in. But when he's not engaged, and it's a team, in this case, he might not feel like, it might be worthy to get geared, revved up for, you get the performance you get like in Charlotte. Now, he also had a rough game against the Knicks. And I think, and even Boston was okay, but I think what you're starting to see when the game got late, the type of defenders he's getting now, and they're not playing him double teams, by the way. These guys are defending him single coverage. So we're talking about, Derek White single coverage. Single coverage again, this, at times with Jaylen Brown, single coverage, obviously the two Knicks wings with OG and Bridges. And it's getting to be tough with his field goal percentage. He had a really brutal game last night. At the time of this recording, it wasn't pretty at all. I'm not really in the body language, but obviously he was not impressed on the bench. I understand it. You get whooped by about 20 something on your home court on a national TV audience. I think a lot of the Raptors felt this was their coming out party. Oh, no one's talking about us. No one's respecting this type of thing. They get on Amazon. Big game, everyone's watching, and they put up a big turd. And Scottie, for Scottie to reach the level that people want Scottie to reach at, those are games that you got to show out. And especially a game like against the Hornets, that's I will not let us lose type of game. You can't have those type of games. Sometimes you just need to say, you know what, if that means I got to put up 40 tonight, so be it. I got to put up 40 tonight and get 20 boards. Sometimes you need a night like that. And I think that's where part of the problem with Scottie is I don't think it's part of his demeanor. Second thing is I don't think he has the skill set to actually pull that off, which is probably the bigger issue in my mind. As the seasons progress, as well as Scottie's played, the holes in his game are going to continue to kind of be illuminated against these big high leverage games. The inability to actually get his own shot, the inability to actually have a strong enough handle, the inability to actually be a threat from the perimeter, the weak footwork in the paint. Those things will start getting exposed as you play better competition, as these teams start to rev up. And I think that's where, if you guys want Scottie to be at the next level, that's where he needs to go. It's not a physical thing right now, man. It's kind of just refining your skill set, man, and getting the mentality of this, every night I'm putting it in. Doesn't matter who's the opponent on the other side. Another thing to consider too is the rotations and what Darko. I just put it Darko. Darko is coaching like a man that is quite desperate. Some of the rotations, some of the individuals, and this is what I talked about when I mentioned Darko earlier in the season. I talk about coaching pragmatists and coaching zealots, and I said Darko's a coaching zealot. This is what I'm talking about. Now you take the game against the Knicks. Quickly's out. Now, he could have just kept the rotation as is, but he was determined to have a safety blanket to have another point guard on the team that's not named Shed. So therefore, Chucky Hepburn comes out. We see you coming. Enter stage left, Chucky Hepburn, in a playing game, in a quarterfinal playing game. A guy's probably seen about 10 minutes all season. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no need for next man up mentality. You should be able to play with the rotation you have, because let me tell you something. If a guy got hurt in a playoff game, you're going to roll out Chucky Hepburn at that point too? Some of the stuff I've seen lately with Darko, man, and don't even start me with the kids, all right? Because I know some of y'all in this case here got blood out for Grady. Grady hasn't played well. But one of the reasons why Grady hasn't played well is, I'll expand this as well too, more in Grady. I called the kids. Your last 3 draft picks the other night, I can't remember who they're playing. This Boston, I think it was. Yeah, Boston. I think they had something like 7, 4, 6, I think were the numbers for those 3 players. And I'm talking about Jacoby Walter, CMB, and Grady. That's ridiculous. And this is what I'm talking about when you have a desperate coach. Because he's a desperate coach, he's trying to break out of this slump. Desperate coaches tend to go with what they feel comfortable with. And in his case, and in most coaches' cases, is vets. So therefore, we're going to get more Mamu. We're going to double down in this case here on Pirtle minutes. Even though he's looked like hot garbage for the most part in the last couple of weeks. We're going to continue, playing as many vets as we can, and the kids be damned. And I'm sorry, anyone's played any sort of hoops, I don't care what level of hoops is. If you're playing on an organized type of team and you're getting into, especially a guy who's used to having the ball in his hands and be able to shoot, and you're just kind of coming in for a spot minutes for 5-6 minutes, and if you miss 2 shots, you're at bench for like 2 days. I'm sorry, for young players that can't be. Now, everyone say, oh, Grady, you got to suck it up. It's different for CMB. It is different for CMB, for example. CMB is going to do hustle plays and get rebounds and stuff of that nature. Stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, Grady's actually been half decent defensively. All this talk about Grady's defense, he's getting in passing lanes. He's holding up his end of the bargain for the most part defensively. He's had some games where he's been like one of the few guys on the bench with a plus. So like that part's not the issue. He's not knocking down shots. Now that's the issue. But the question is, why is he not knocking down shots? Well, the the sporadic ways they're using him, where he's in some games, he's not in other games. You see it a little bit with Walter as well too. Where it's like they're in and then they're out and then they're playing another game and then they're not playing for 2 games. They get a couple of minutes in another game. You can't play young players like that. You got to give young players rope to go and make mistakes. But the problem is now, because you guys decided you wanted to go for it, whatever the hell that meant, getting Brandon Ingram and loading up with Mamu in the free agency market, who, by the way, those 2 guys obviously are going to take minutes from these young guys. Because, hey, Darko's trying to save his job. And in some ways, I don't wrong him. Hey, it's a good paycheck. Good for him. But this is what you get. So you can't have it both ways, folks. If you're all in and got all the chips in about you got to make the playoffs this year, and you decide to get these players for that, you can't be upset now when the young guys are not coming together and you get relapses of the young guys. Because they're not going to get clean minutes or consistent minutes. And that's a problem. Because now you have a situation where you're not good enough at the moment, it looks like, because I would suspect by the same time next week, this team probably will be in the play-in, in the standings. Based on what I'm seeing right now and based on the teams that are right now just slightly behind them by like a half a game, they're starting to play better. They're going to be in the play-in pretty soon. And so now you're looking at the play-in, and you're putting all this work and stuff like that. You can't figure out what's going on. You're desperate, so you're playing the vets more, and now you're sacrificing the future. Because those 3 first-round draft picks right now are getting very limited time, and they're regressing. Yeah, everyone tells me Darko's supposed to be this great development guru. All these guys on Spaces, all these guys forums, everyone's talking about Darko. That's what they brought him in for. I want to know who's all these players that he's actually improved their game. Because I'm waiting to see it. I'm waiting to see it, folks. And never mind the game management. We knew he's always been lousy when it comes to the replay, the reviews. He stinks in those ones. However, the other night there, when they're playing, it was Boston down 10. Quickly's in the dead man's corner over there, and he refuses to call a timeout. He gets a 5-second count. You're the damn point guard. Going back to point guard play, as I mentioned, is one of the issues I said, is one of the pillars of their issues. You got to call timeout in this case here. And what the heck is Darko doing? He's sleeping at the wheel too. One of you 2 got to call timeout. Like, that's ridiculous. That should never happen. Not with like 2 minutes, not with like 3 minutes left to go in a game. I'm sorry. These are the type of things I'm talking about. Late game execution, late game decisions. And you guys expect Darko in this case, who in 3 years has not, in my mind, improved one lick in those categories. One lick. But you're telling me in this case here, I should have faith in Darko. We're heading to the promised land. One lick, I haven't seen anything with Darko improving as a coach in those situations. It's easy when you're getting whooped by 20 or you're whooping someone by 20. It's easy to coach those games. But when these 1 or 2 or 3 possession games, then you start to find out the mettle of the coach. And for 3 years now, it's been very disappointing in my mind when it comes to Darko's performance in those circumstances. So, what's next? What do they do to change this? Let's get into what they're going to do to change this. Honestly, I think right now you have to find a steady rotation. And you have to give these young guys opportunities to play at the moment. Because that's the only way you're going to get better. Because the vets are the vets. They're not going to improve any way to kind of lift you up. It's the young guys and their development is going to expand your possibilities. So more minutes for CMB. More minutes for Grady. More minutes for Walter. Consistent minutes. Those guys should not be fighting for minutes for Ochai Agbaji. A guy that might not even be in the league in about a year or two. That's ridiculous. I said it yesterday in that space. I posed the question. I said, is there any team in the NBA, if they had Ochai Agbaji and Grady Dick on the same team, would you think in this case here they would actually be fighting for the same minutes? Replace Grady and throw in Jacoby Walter, same thing. It's ridiculous. Of course it's ridiculous. But only in this team that this nonsense occurs. Only on this team. When it's all said and done, you're going to have to play these young guys, man, for your salvation, because they're the only guys that are going to be able to grow to expand this team. BI is BI. IQ is IQ at this point. Quite honestly, Scottie is what Scottie is for the most part at this point. RJ, same thing. Pearl, definitely. They're not budging. They are what they are. So if you want, in this case, increase the delta, increase the possibility for a ceiling, the young guys are it, guys. Those 3 guys in particular, throw in Shed if you want to. They have to be the ones. Everyone said, well, Sheds look better. Well, the reason why Sheds look better is that Shed, in this case, a point guard, he gets asterisks. Point guards always develop faster because point guards have the ball in their hands almost all the time. So therefore, you get to make the decisions. You're handling the ball. You choose when you want to get your own shot. You can play your game. Point guards tend to have the ability to kind of get their game off, unless you're Malachi Flynn, who really never was a point guard. You're able to get your shot off, and you're able to do your thing. So Shed has prospered from that, the fact that his position and the fact Darko loves the point guard. He's been able to kind of grow, in this case, in that role. With consistent minutes from last year to this year. His minutes have never changed. It's the other guys, in this case, that have intermittent minutes. And it's costing us, as a franchise, as a fandom, to see what we actually have. Because guys are coming up for contracts. Grady first. Guys are coming up for contracts. And once again, we're in a position, to some extent, just like Scottie, we don't know what the hell we got. So what do we do? What's going to be next for these guys? Well, as I mentioned before, this schedule does not get easier, and they're going to be heading out the West Coast, and there's some doozies of some matchups coming up near Christmas and New Year's. As I said before, I think in the near future, this team's going to be in the play-in. And if it gets to that point, and we gets to January, or say mid-January, and they're still free-falling, interesting decisions have to be made by Bobby Webster. Because when it's all said and done, all roads lead back to him. Which is the reason why I did not want him as the GM of this team. I wanted a clean break, a clean slate for the previous administration or regime. Because Bobby Webster is still with the same mindset to some extent as Masai. I don't trust him in this case to make a move. And if he does make a move, it's going to be pretty much a cosmetic move. I don't need Revlon moves at this point. Like moving Ochai now, about 2 weeks, moving Ochai now, fine, that's great. You move Ochai. Finally clear some space if that's the case. You get a second round pick for him, great. Get him out of there so we can get some of these young guys to play consistently. But that move should have been made all from last summer. These guys sleeping at the wheel. And actually think that in this case here, Dark was actually giving minutes to Ochai. Man, shooting about 10% for 3, about 30% from the field. But it's Grady that we're worried about. And this guy's eating up minutes with Walter and Grady. Okay. Make it make sense, as they say. Make it make sense. I'll say this, though. We're going to find out a lot in the next 4 weeks about this Raptors team and find out what type of season is going to be in 2026 real quick. Real quick. I'm going to leave it there because right now, I'll say this, Raptor fans. SOS is putting out, man, we're in trouble because teams are getting better. The schedule's starting to turn. The road trips out west are going to start happening. And this team right now, with RJ now at least about 2 weeks away still, I don't see anything unless, especially with Darko as your coach, I don't know sure where we're seeing wins coming up soon. He's still got another game with Charlotte coming up too, by the way. So that ain't even something that could get you well, because as they get healthier too, and they seem to match up quite well with the Raptors, it's gonna be hard pressed for some of these teams coming up. We'll see, but yeah, I'm not gonna bet the house on that one. Folks, hey, as always, man, you can find me on X. Going back and forth with Raptor fans with this team. You can find me on Facebook, find me on Blue Sky, and of course, you can find me right here on YouTube. As always, appreciate the support. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think in this case here. Do you think the Raptors could turn this around? What's gonna, and if you think they're gonna turn it around, what's gonna be the catalyst that's gonna turn them around? Curious to hear your thoughts on that. Anyways, guys, as always, man, keep it locked, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.